Okay, yes, everybody who wishes to join is with us. So we will start. As I said just now, perhaps before you joined, if you're with us and you want to introduce yourself in the chat,
Bienvenue tout le monde.
That's nice. We can
Si
see
vous voulez,
who's with us from different countries in Europe, from different organizations.
Dans le chat. Vous êtes le bienvenu. Nous avons des gens de plusieurs pays, de plusieurs organisations.
We have Russian and English translation.
En anglais.
We have translation into French if it's needed. So could we start by asking, is there anybody here who wishes to hear what we have to say in French and not in English? Please raise your hand or raise your hand electronically. I do not see anybody.
Personne pour l'instant. Ok, bon, on va arrêter. Et on va,
does somebody want to ask that question in French to be sure? Adam or Stephanie, could you ask whether there's anybody who wishes to have a French translation?
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. On avait prévu une traduction vers le français, mais nous ne savons pas s'il y a des gens qui souhaitent écouter en français. Alors, si vous voulez, si vous avez besoin, vous voulez écouter en français, levez vos mains électroniquement. Non. Et un,
okay.
Et deux, et trois.
Okay, very good. So we will start and we'll work in Russian and English. My name is Simon Pirani. I will be facilitating the session today. Actually, there's one more thing before we start. I think we're going to record. Do we need to turn that on?
No, we're already recording.
Done.
Fine. Okay, so we're recording. Thank you. Now, this Zoom meeting has been organized by the European Network for Solidarity with Ukraine and Against War. This is the second of two calls during which we're presenting a broad overview of the attacks on human rights, democracy, and civil society in the areas of Ukraine temporarily occupied by Russian forces. The first call we had was on Monday, the 4th of July, with representatives of several human rights defense organizations. And there's now a recording of that available on YouTube. And we'll put a link in the chat for anybody who hasn't seen that. And we will also be recording today's call and putting that online. On this evening's call, we will focus on the labor movement in the occupied areas and on the work of our friends in the Eastern Human Rights Group. And we're very pleased they've been able to join us today. Now, these calls have a practical purpose. We have asked our speakers to tell us about the situation in the occupied areas and to tell us about what their organizations are doing about that, but also to tell us what they think we might be able to do, if anything, from outside Ukraine. This is a practical and complex issue. We do not expect to find all the answers this evening on this call. We will have to keep working at this. And with this in mind, in addition to today's call, the European Solidarity Network and its group, which is focusing on this point about the occupied areas, will have another call on Sunday. That will be at 11 o'clock European time. That's 10 o'clock here in the UK. And on that call, we will discuss what we can do practically to develop this work. If you wish to participate in that, you're very welcome. And I'll soon put a link in the chat for that call also. If you can't join that, but you're still interested, let us know, and we'll be circulating information about as we go on. Now I'm going to introduce our speakers. They'll each speak for about 15 minutes. They'll be speaking with interpretation. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion, and we welcome everybody to participate in that. So both of our speakers this evening are from the Eastern Human Rights Group. This group was set up very shortly after the start of the Russian attack on Ukraine in 2014. And the group has monitored consistently the situation for the labor movement and for the citizens generally in the Donetsk and Lugansk so-called People's Republics since that time. And they've not only monitored, but they've also been very active in supporting the rights of citizens in those areas, and also supporting the labor movement, trade union activists, both in those republics and also in the parts of Donetsk and Lugansk that have remained under the control of the Ukrainian government. So we're very pleased to have you here. Which one of you would like to go first? Okay, so great. Pavel Lisyansky will go first. Pavel is both a founding organizer of the Eastern Human Rights Group and also director of the Institute of Strategic Research and Safety. So, Pavel, the floor is yours.
Donc, Pavel, à toi la parole.
Добрый день, уважаемые присутствующие. Как уже сказал Саймон, меня зовут Лисянский Павел.
As Simon already said, my name is Pavel Lisyansky, and I'm a human rights activist. Before 2015,
I was an activist
part of
until 2015.
trade union.
I was part of an independent
Do we
trade
have
union.
simultaneous translation, or should I wait?
Ah, pardon.
Да.
To wait a little bit. Now, we as organization were established in 2014. Back then, we were lawyers. Now, we are real human rights defenders, and we can defend human rights in court, be it as regards criminal cases and other cases. In 2017, the right of representing anyone is in the court was granted only to those people who have a license.
We
can see that now that there is a violation of human rights. As for the labor movement, we can say that there is forced mobilization. I, as a lawyer, represent interests of a informatics teacher who was born in 1991, and he was mobilized together with other workers. He was the one who was taken prisoner, and now I am defending his rights. I support Ukraine, of course, in this war, and I call Russia an aggressor. But I think that everybody in Ukraine has the right to be defended in court. So since we are a country who is fighting for human rights, I wanted to defend this teacher because he is a worker, let's say, and he became the victim of this situation, and I'm trying to prove this in court. We already had a first hearing. I seem to have gained some success, and the next hearing will be on the 3rd of August. I want you to understand clearly that even in this very difficult situation, we are still defending human rights and the principles of democracy. Another important thing is for the trade unions. Unfortunately, within the territories controlled by Ukraine, nothing was done by the trade unions to stop the war. They were unable to do anything. The trade unions in those areas turned more into some sort of formal institution, because you won't find any mention of those trade unions and any kind of action that they have taken in order to defend the labor rights. No, to the contrary, in 2020, we were part of the miners' strike in the temporarily occupied areas, such as Anthracite City. There was the miners' strike. There was the miners' strike in the Luhansk Republic, and the armed forces of Luhansk had to be called in to put the strike down. The mines were closed, people were fired, and it was all. Pavel, our interpreters would ask you to make some little pauses in what you're saying. Thank you. So we supported them financially, and we also carried out an information campaign so that the Ukrainian government would pay attention to the miners' problem in the temporarily occupied areas. The main problems there for the labor movements are, the first one is mobilization, forced mobilization.
Le problème principal pour les travailleurs dans les zones occupées, c'est la mobilisation forcée.
In the metallurgical sector, teachers, all men who working there
tous les fonctionnaires
had to do something else. So let's say 20% of workers is maintained to work. There are a lot of proofs to that. If some of the members of our discussion would like to find out for themselves, I can give you phone numbers of people who are family members of the forcibly mobilized workers. Starting from the first days of war, we tried to help these workers. We tried to take them out of those republics. We tried to help them to migrate, and there were some channels that we enabled. So we tried to save these workers' lives. As for the territories controlled by Ukraine, there we also see the violations of human rights. There was a law that encroaches on the rights of workers, and we are trying to investigate it. But because of the war, we cannot cry openly about the violations of workers' rights, because we'll be blamed for doing something in the interest of Russia. But we are still trying to carry out these efforts. We try to file cases to courts, because there is even a new norm when there is a temporary break of labor relations, so that people are not fired, but they are not paid any salaries either. But we hope that we'll be able to win these cases. As for other problems, we can say that the living standards have gone down. There is no drinking water in many cities in the occupied areas. There is no health care.
Et il y a des zones
utility
sans eau
services
potable, et il y a des
are
zones sans service
also
de santé.
not able
de
to
base.
work because people who
Il y a
work
des
there
régions
are
où on ne peut
afraid
pas
to come to
travailler,
work
où
because
les
they
gens
get
simplement
mobilized.
ont peur de venir
The
travailler
Russian
parce qu'ils ont
Federation
peur
has
d'être
launched
mobilisés
a
dans l'armée
call
contre leur gré.
for
Ça,
volunteers
dans
to
les
come
territoires
to
occupés.
Donbass and work there.
Donc la Russie essaye de
Women's
recruter des gens
strikes and
en
protests
Russie
are
pour
very
venir
active
travailler
right now in the
dans les
occupied
territoires
areas.
occupés
Those women
parce qu'il y a une pénurie
who are wives of men who were mobilized are trying to find their
Il y a
husbands.
aussi beaucoup de
They gather in groups of
des femmes,
15
des
or
hommes qui ont été
20
mobilisés,
women, and
qui
they are trying to
essayent de
find
retrouver
or
leur
get
mari, d'avoir des nouvelles
information from
de leur
the
mari, qui a été
occupation
mobilisé
authorities.
typiquement contre leur gré.
In
Et
May,
nous
they
aidons ces
stopped the
femmes
forced
qui typiquement
mobilization for
qui se
3
forment
weeks.
en groupe, en
We are
cercle
trying
d'une
to
vingtaine
help
de
these
femmes.
women
Nous aidons ces groupes de
to
femmes
write
à
letters,
intervenir auprès des
collective
autorités
letters to the Russian
de ces républiques
Federation.
autoproclamées.
We are trying to
D'intervenir auprès de
support
ces
their
autorités-là
protest
envers les
through
autorités
legal
de la
means,
fédération
so
russe,
that they
d'aider ces femmes à
bring
retrouver
up
leur
this
mari, à avoir
issue.
des nouvelles.
They used our services. So
On
how
nous a
did we
accusés
find the teacher I told you about? We got a call from his family member. So the lady called and she said that there was this kind of situation, but I need to underscore that we are supporting Ukraine in any case, yet democracy and human rights should be respected.
Donc, nous disons très clairement, et nos actions le prouvent, que même si nous sommes pour l'Ukraine dans cette guerre, nous défendons, nous assurons le droit de chaque individu, y compris les individus qui pourraient ne pas être
Donbass
de la même
is
point de vue que
an
nous.
industrial area with coal and mining facilities. Now, all hospitals in these areas are filled in with wounded soldiers.
Il y a plein de
The healthcare seems to be
blessés.
dysfunctional. If
Le système de santé est dysfonctionnel.
Goes to hospital, they do not get
Quelqu'un va à
care, they
l'hôpital.
do not get treatment because there are too many people in the hospital
Il y a trop de
already.
gens dans les
So
hôpitaux.
a lot of men are trying to flee this area.
Beaucoup d'hommes essayent de quitter ces zones.
And we are addressed so that we help to transfer these women to other, this men to other countries, be it to Kazakhstan or some other countries bordering with Russia.
Qui ont été blessés
We are
sortir du
trying
pays
to help these men.
Pour
Of course, not everything goes very smooth. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the forced deportation.
Il y a beaucoup de cas personnels comme ça. Il y a aussi
people are deported to the Russian Federation.
Déportation forcée.
There are cases when people go out voluntarily, but sometimes they are forced to leave the country. There is the so-called filtration procedure. When the Russian troops come to a certain area, they introduce this filtration measure, which means that they are searching for journalists or law enforcement agencies. They take Ukrainian men to camps where those are submitted to some sort of re-education process. So if the Russian forces see that this man would not support Ukraine too much, they propose that they come to Russia. But if they see that this man is strongly pro-Ukrainian, they want to deport him somewhere else. According to the information we have, there are more than 1 million of deported men, and we are trying to bring them back to Ukraine. Those are usually workers or people from workers' families, and they are sent to Kamchatka, to Spitsbergen. So these are very remote areas in Russia.
Peut-être aussi pour les besoins de sécurité.
So there is a program that was launched in 2007, and it is targeted at those people who come from the former USSR countries and can become Russian citizens easily, so they can find a job or a place where they can stay. But usually those men are sent to some very remote areas in Russia.
D'aller vivre quelques années dans les zones
Рабочие из-за языкового барьера вынуждены были ехать работать в Российскую Федерацию.
So a lot of workers would come to Russia, and there were also people who went to the United States and to Europe, but the majority came to Russia because of the language barrier and also because of their specialization, because minus Russia.
Qui parlent russe, mais qui parlent peut-être pas d'autres langues, d'autres pays attirants pour les migrants. Donc il y a une migration de travail vers la Russie qui n'est pas
if the family wants to come back to Ukraine.
Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on fait si une famille veut revenir en Ukraine?
We also help with repatriation.
Nous aidons
to the families of the workers.
Je parle des membres de
We
la
also
famille
cover
des
their costs of traveling
en Russie. On essaye de mobiliser des
and do it either
sommes
through
d'argent,
Baltic countries
de
or
les faire
whether they
venir,
want to go to
soit à travers
Kazakhstan
les pays
or
baltes.
any other third country.
Mais on aide aussi les gens qui veulent partir, de partir
This is our second main problem.
Russie vers
And
les
the
pays
third
baltes,
problem is
de Russie vers le
the
Kazakhstan.
education. On the occupied territories now, the education and the curriculum is being rewritten.
Le programme scolaire est en train d'être refait.
I receive presentations from the teachers.
Des travailleurs, des professeurs.
So they complete another twist history and they present it to the kids.
La matière qui est enseignée, par exemple, dans les courses de l'histoire.
I'm ready to finish now because I've got the end of my time. I will be ready to answer the questions.
Du temps qui m'a été proposé, mais je suis disposé à répondre aux questions.
Павел, спасибо большое. И давайте сразу послушаем, что скажет Вера.
People, if you wish,
Thank you very
it's
much.
as usual on
Merci
Zoom. If
beaucoup.
you wish
Si
to
vous voulez
your questions in the
poser
chat,
une
please
question,
do that. But also, you're very welcome to say them yourselves.
Aussi,
but let's move on to hear what Vera can tell us. Vera is a lawyer. She's director of the Eastern Human Rights Group. And we're very pleased to have her as well as Pavel with us today. So, Vera.
Alors, Vera, à toi.
Добрый вечер. Я рада возможности
Bonsoir. Je suis content d'être avec vous.
Я бы хотела рассказать о том, что какими действиями оккупационной администрации на вновь захваченных территориях после полномасштабной военной агрессии действуют. Прежде всего, при захвате новых населенных пунктов и территорий в Луганской и Донецкой областях оккупационной администрации Российской Федерации искореняют всячески украинские символы государственности. Я имею в виду флаг государства Украины.
The Ukrainian symbols, state symbols.
Разрушают краеведческие музеи.
They also destroy the symbols of Ukrainian statehood and destroy the historical.
Изымают литературу на украинском языке. Это табу для российских оккупантов, поэтому они все это уничтожают. Заменяются на псевдосимволы государственной власти оккупационных администраций, так называемых ЛНР и ДНР. Что делают оккупационные администрации? Создается сеть отделений почты.
Symbols.
Почта Донбасса, так называемая.
They were created with the best.
Отделение банки как бы местные.
Donc, il y a eu ce problème avec les symboles.
So, and use the
По заниженному курсу гривны из оборота у местного населения.
Вера, минуточку, пожалуйста, потому что, извиняюсь, есть какая-то техническая проблема с нашими переводчиками. Давайте остановимся, пока мы это разрешаем. Now, I just have a message that there's a problem with our translation. So, what do we have to do? The interpreter needs to select listen in Russian and speak in English.
I have done that.
Okay, let me ask our interpreters, do you think you're ready to go? Hello, interpreters.
Я могу перевести, Саймон, что вы говорите на русский, но дело в том, что получается, что мы все время меняем.
Какая у вас ситуация?
Can you hear me, Simon? Can we try it again?
Я могу продолжать?
Okay.
Продолжаю, так?
No, минуточку. Извиняюсь. So, where are our interpreters? Can you hear us? Okay. Нет, еще наша техническая проблема нерешима. Okay, the technical
Simon,
problem.
do you hear me or not?
Yes, yeah, solved. Okay.
Проблемы, простите, пожалуйста, у нас были проблемы с переводом, потому что они не слышали английский перевод. Мы сейчас попробуем еще раз.
Okay. Okay. So, да, пожалуйста, Вера, продолжайте. Извиняюсь за эту проблему.
Yes, please, Vera, please continue.
Я как упомянула, банки местные, отделение почты.
The occupiers create the banks.
Donc, les occupants ont créé des banques.
Departments.
Et ils ont aussi pris le contrôle de
As like the local authorities.
Et d'autres services d'État au niveau local.
So these local authorities
Donc, c'est
are usually the members of the party, of the political party of the regions party.
Normalement, ce sont dominés par des gens de la partie des régions, le parti de Yanukovych.
Люди, которые находятся в оккупации, местное население, массово дезинформируется.
The local population is being totally disinformed by the Russian Federation. And people are staying without interpretation.
Sans interlocuteur, en fait.
People are staying without communication. And that's why this
problème de communication avec des instances.
And a local population is being told
la population
that Ukraine Ukraine has
est aujourd'hui que c'est
capitulated and they have to give up.
Que l'Ukraine est sur le point de capituler.
This disinformation.
Donc il y a une campagne constante de manipulation, de désinformation.
This disinformation also leads to the mass deportation of people.
Ce qui
to take
démobilise
out local people.
Des gens. Il y a un départ massif des gens.
And repopulate them into the eastern part of Russian Federation.
Ces gens partent et on les encourage en fait d'aller vivre dans les zones dépeuplées de l'Est et du Nord de la Fédération russe.
It's a mass deportation of children
Donc, en fait, il y a aussi là-dedans
usually
une
the orphanages.
Massif d'enfants et d'orphelins et d'autres enfants.
So apparently there are Russians who
les maisons d'aide pour enfants. Ces enfants-là sont massivement déplacés vers la Fédération russe.
Adopt Ukrainian children.
Il y a des Russes
And the
sans
Russian
enfants
authorities are
qui
creating
souhaitent
special
adopter les enfants provenant de l'Ukraine. Et les autorités de la Fédération russe
so they create the special
essayent de faciliter
courses
telles adoptions.
which create
Il y a une espèce de processus de formation des parents
education courses.
adoptés.
They have to identify these kids.
Et aussi, il y a
And
des cours
children.
d'éducation pour ces enfants-là, pour les préparer pour une vie
They are trying to
future en
create
Russie,
additional
comme citoyen
communication
russe.
channels so that people can
Nous
understand
essayons
the
donc de
information
créer
around.
des chaînes et des réseaux de communication afin que les
so
gens
that-
puissent faire circuler des informations entre eux
So now to
et
bring
mieux
these children
comprendre ce
back to
qui se
Ukraine,
passe.
the chances
Évidemment, notre but est de
for
faire
human rights defenders are
revenir
really very slim.
ces enfants en Ukraine, mais malheureusement, nos moyens, nos possibilités de faire revenir ces enfants ukrainiens en Ukraine
What concerns
sont très maigres.
socioeconomic
C'est très, très difficile.
development and situation in Ukraine, I would like to add
Moi, je voudrais parler un peu aussi de la situation socio-économique en Ukraine.
because we do not control
Nous ne contrôlons
the
pas.
Ukraine cannot control the territory and therefore they
L'Ukraine ne
cannot pay,
contrôle pas
make the
l'ensemble
payments.
du territoire et ne peut pas verser des fonds, faire des virements vers les zones
And instead,
occupées par la Russie.
the Russian Federation manipulated the population into applying
Mais-
for Russian passports.
Donc, en même temps, les occupants russes manipulent la population locale, les territoires occupés,
So
et
de
font tout pour
facto,
les encourager de
that people
prendre
are
des
being
documents
left
d'identité russe,
with
de
no
prendre
means
donc la
to
citoyenneté russe.
exist, and
Ce
therefore,
qui,
by starving them
évidemment, une fois qu'ils ont
into-
pris les documents d'identité russe,
into getting
ils perdent
to
encore
apply for
plus
the
de
Russian Federation
possibilités
passport.
d'interagir avec les autorités ukrainiennes, à toucher des revenus
Kherson and
provenant
Zaporizhia
du gouvernement
regions,
ukrainien. Et donc, ces gens se retrouvent
they
tôt ou
already
tard
have
avec
the
comme seule
network of
possibilité de
passportization,
partir
passport
vers la
issuing
Russie.
to population.
Il y a toutes sortes de tentatives d'essayer de convaincre les gens de prendre une carte d'identité russe, un passeport russe.
And but and the basic products on these occupied territories are 3-4 times more expensive
On parle
than
du coût
on
de
the
la vie.
Ukrainian
Les
territory,
produits de
in
base
spite
dans
of
ces
the fact
régions
that there is a war.
occupées sont carrément de 3 ou 4 fois plus chers qu'en Ukraine propre, à cause de la guerre.
So at the moment, the application process for the Russian passport is 10,000 rubles.
Pour
That's
l'instant,
what they give
si on
for
veut demander un passeport russe,
people.
ça coûte 2000 roubles.
And also the forced migration or deportation of Ukrainians into the east of Russia.
Comme j'ai dit, la migration forcée vers la Russie est un problème préoccupant pour nous.
And there's also the program that the medical students will
Mais
be
aussi,
sent
on voit aussi que
on
les
the
étudiants
territory
de
of
médecine
Ukraine.
vont être obligés de quitter
So that there would be
la région.
students that would go and treat people in in Ukraine, the population of Ukraine. So what Russia is creating is that they will be making their training on the Ukrainian citizens because they're not fully qualified or trained.
La Russie propose
because the Ukrainian doctors who did work on the territory, occupied territory, they all left to Ukraine. The similar situation is with the teachers.
C'est aussi vrai pour une bonne partie des professeurs. Et donc, la Russie, en fait, essaye maintenant de faire venir dans les territoires occupés ukrainiens des étudiants de médecine qui vont servir comme professeurs parce que tout simplement, il n'y a pas de médecins qualifiés. Il n'y a pas un nombre suffisant de médecins pour nos régions. Donc, la Russie fait venir des étudiants.
A Russian Federation introduced an additional payment.
Parce qu'une bonne partie des profs ukrainiens
So
quittent le pays.
So they motivate these teachers and future doctors that they will receive the status of the veterans of the military action.
Et on propose des incentives
so people will agree because that they will receive an additional bonus of being a veteran.
Zones occupées de l'Ukraine, en les assurant qu'ils auront tous les bénéfices des anciens combattants. Voilà, je suis disposé à répondre aux questions.
Thank you. Vera. We have two questions. Let's start with those. First from Kirill, and secondly from Darina. Perhaps let me ask both of you to say your questions in English so that everybody knows what you're asking and our speakers can respond. Kirill.
Nos invités vont répondre. Kirill, ouvre ton micro.
Yes. Добрый вечер, Вера. Добрый вечер, Павел. Спасибо вам.
Hello, Vera. Hello, Pavel. Thank you so much for your work and for your report. It is utterly surprising that you're able to continue work in these conditions. My question is related to the international level of the trade union movement, because we hear that some people are citing some unions in Donetsk, Luhansk, and now in Kherson as well. I dropped a link in the chat, and you could see for yourself that there are some reports that the trade unions from Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson have established relations with the Russian trade unions, and they have become part of the Russian trade union system. To us, it appears rather strange because the organization that they joined, Sotsprof, is not a trade union. It's a project created by Putin's administration to destroy free trade unions in Russia. They never had any members, but according to their reports, they have acquired some new members in Lugansk and Kherson. Do you know anything about the activities of Sotsprof in these occupied territories? Who do they represent? Are there real trade union members? And what is their role in this state system? Because even if they call themselves trade unions, we clearly understand that they are not democratic organizations of workers, but they are part of the state machine. What role do they play in the repression system? So that's my question. Thank you, Kirill. A great question.
Voilà la question.
I have been following the trade unions in Luhansk and Donetsk from 2014. There are members of these trade unions, and they are those who used to be in those trade unions back in the USSR. So we can say that those trade unions are in a way the follow-up to the system that used to be established there. So the basis of these organizations is the infrastructure that they had back in the Soviet Union. So that's why they got revived, and in 2014 they joined the Russian trade unions. In the Kherson region, some trade unions left. For instance, in Luhansk, our friend, the president of the Free Trade Union left, Valery Chernyshy left Luhansk. He is now in a different place. So the trade union leader, and that trade union is one of the biggest in Ukraine, he left the occupied areas. So we can say that the trade unions in Luhansk and Donetsk had voiced no criticism against the occupiers. They even helped the local authorities to carry out the forced mobilization of workers, and they did nothing to prevent it. And I can say, talk about this as an expert because I have proofs from the wives of workers who tried to approach us. The trade union leaders tried to help with the forced mobilization because they were paid by not taking into the army themselves. In 2020, when a lot of mines were closed, and as you know, in the minor cities, there are not only mines, but there are also schools and hospitals and other facilities. So I myself lived in a similar situation. In one of the cities, there was a mine that was closed in 2020, and you can find a video of people who are shouting at the president of the Luhansk trade union, but they still closed the mine. All the trade union leaders are approved by the administration of Luhansk and Donetsk. The first leader, Lech Akilov, who was the leader of the trade unions in Luhansk, he was also a member of the Regions Party. He had nothing to do with the trade unions activities. He was just appointed. Now there is a different person. He was the head of the miners' union in Luhansk, but still he was appointed by the administration. There are no elections there. The trade unions from Luhansk and Donetsk republics are used by the administration to draw the members of the workers' movement to support these two republics. As you know, the World Trade Unions Federation also came to these republics. So this is the only thing that they do. We even had a report in 2017 on the activity of trade unions in Luhansk and
Donetsk. The next question is from Darina about the deportations. Please, Darina.
Добрый вечер, коллеги. Я из
Hello,
уважения
colleagues. Out of respect for the audience, I'm going to speak Russian, even though I'm trying not to use it now. Vera, Pavel, thank you for your work. I am a sociologist from Kiev. I worked in status and other analytical centers. Now I'm working alone. I carry out research for humanitarian organizations and human rights organizations.
Je travaille avec des organisations humanitaires, des organisations de droits de la personne.
The territories that are not controlled by Ukraine and are controlled by Ukraine, I'm familiar with the context. Now I am focusing on the criticism voiced against big international organizations, especially ICRC, the International Red Cross Committee.
J'ai travaillé beaucoup sur la question des critiques qui ont été faites
à l'égard
d'une fédération
and they collected a lot of donations, but they didn't do much.
Ils ont ramassé beaucoup d'argent, ils parlent beaucoup, mais ils font très peu. Donc ma question est la suivante.
Their mandate is unique because they can bring deportees back, those who were forcibly deported into the Russian Federation, and they can also help to bring back corpses. So my question is about the deportations. What's your evaluation of the Red Cross Committee work in this area? Have you cooperated with them? Was your cooperation good? So please go ahead. I can say that this organization is not effective enough because they have a lot of resources, they have the mandate, and they could be a lot more efficient. I could follow up on this. We even created a Telegram bot to help collect information about the deportees. We are collecting donations for that work as well. I met the Red Cross representatives quite a lot. I met the central office as well as the sub office, and I did that prior to the war. But we only talked and talked. They ask us if we have information, they ask us for the information, and then they say goodbye. That's all. Starting from 2014, we liberated 5 people from prisons in Luhansk and Donetsk. We had no help from administration. Those were not political prisoners. They were just held in prison. But we managed to do that by ourselves. Before that, we tried to address the Red Cross, but it didn't work. It seems that the international organizations in Ukraine have certain problems. If you're a small NGO, you're not taken seriously. And we can see that even right now. I know these people, and I respect people of the Red Cross, but my assessment is a negative one because I think they could have done a lot more. They have organizational resources, administrative, financial resources. In a certain situation, for instance, if we have a head of the administration or a prosecutor who doesn't want to take our visit, and it seems that the Red Cross can come to any door. They can come to any official, and they could even come to the temporarily occupied territories. So my overall assessment is a negative one.
Mais les gens de la Croix-Rouge, ça semble qu'ils peuvent venir facilement parler avec nos dirigeants.
For those questions and answers, we've got a question now from Aurora. Aurora, please ask your question.
So, hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you well now. Yes, that's good.
Okay. Okay.
Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And again, thank you for the contributions. It's always a great pleasure, the discussions that we've had, given me loads of things to think about. And since I'm not really an expert, honestly, in the Eastern Europe area, I am much more knowledgeable on the Middle East. So there's loads of ground that I need to cover. I was wondering, is the eventual restrictions to unionizations of workers, like what is the legislative ground that allows workers to unionize, and how free are workers to unionize in the occupied territories and in Ukraine at large, and how large is there room for maneuver for the eventual building up of a new alternative unions to the ones that have been mainly for a more traditional stance, let's say.
Okay, thank you. Is that question, did you hear the translation clearly? Is that question clear?
Yes, we did. Yes, we heard the translation. Everything is okay. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Please continue.
In the temporarily occupied areas, or let's say in Ukraine, there are possibilities to create new trade unions. They are created in a less active manner, but in the temporarily occupied areas, no trade unions can be established. There is no legal ground. For the whole history, there was only one person who tried to help protesting miners. There was this independent trade union of Hamas, but it was a virtual or an online trade union, and then this person disappeared. So this trade union was not located in Donbass itself. I don't know if there is anybody from Ukraine here in the audience, but in Ukraine, unfortunately, people got disappointed in trade unions. They're not, the trade unions are losing their grip. There are some left political organizations, and they seem to have a better sway over workers. They are more active in defending workers' rights. So that's why Vera and I and other lawyers, we are going to establish a human rights union so that we could defend workers and we could help trade unions to defend labor rights of their workers. Trade unions in Ukraine can go on picket, they can do that. They can go on a manifestation, but it's been a long time since we heard some talks about their victories in courts. Trade unions have problems with legal activities, with legally defending the rights of workers. They need help, and that's exactly what we want to do. That's a contribution that we want to make. So we will represent the interests of workers in courts. Prior to 2022, we managed to achieve some success. We managed to win over some salaries and remunerations for workers. Unfortunately, this kind of activity is not very popular in Ukraine right now. In Donbass and Luhansk, that's impossible. Even that kind of activity is impossible because people who are trying to engage in the trade union activities there would get arrested. I would like also to add a little bit, because of the emergency situation in Ukraine, the activity of trade unions being restricted. There is no possibility for massive gatherings or strikes or labor rights defense campaigns. That's all been stalled. Yet lawyers such as us can defend individual interests. We can take up individual cases as well as collective ones. We can defend workers' rights in courts against the administration. So that's what can be done.
Now we have a small queue of people. So first we have a question from Alphonse, and then there is Cheryl, and Kirill wants to come back. So Alphonse, you've kindly written your question in the chat. Could somebody, you or somebody else, tell us in English? Alphonse, there's some problem with your sound. We cannot hear. Okay, so I'm going to read out the question, which somebody has kindly translated. Alphonse's question is, there are many humanitarian projects to support Ukraine, but do you think it would be possible to have such a project with unions and for unions?
У нас сейчас профсоюзы, в принципе, этим только и занимаются.
That's what the trade unions are doing right now. I know what the free trade unions are doing. We have Mikhail, who is charged with this work. We met 3 weeks ago in Kiev, and that's what he said. We are trying to support workers. But what do workers need now? That's the question we need to ask. Not simply getting some canned food. We really need to think about some essential things. If that's a temporarily occupied area, then the workers need support in organizing a transfer or a way to leave the territory. If those are workers in Ukraine, then they are looking for a job, be it in Ukraine or outside Ukraine, so that they could provide for their families. My colleagues and I thought a lot about the ways to help the labor movement. There are a lot of humanitarian projects. You're absolutely right. And they have a lot of funds there. But the problem is that they do not solve all the problems of workers. They're insufficient to do that. Those NGOs and funds can help solve some short-term issues. As for the trade unions, they can also hand out food to workers, but all of that is really short-term. And that also needs to be done constantly, because you need to give not simply a fish to someone, but also a fishing line, so that people can provide for themselves. For instance, in Kazakhstan or in other countries, when people also speak Russian, some workers could be taken in so that they can continue working and providing for their families, and so that they are integrated into the society. I think that's a good response to forced deportation. Of course, we can establish that kind of a project, and it's needed to be done, but the workers are saying to us, thank you for humanitarian aid to our colleagues, to our partners, but what I really need is a workplace.
Donc, ce que les gens ont besoin, c'est du travail.
Okay, we will go to Cheryl next, and Kirill,
Okay,
please wait, then we'll come to you. Cheryl.
Okay, Kirill.
Hi, Cheryl. Yep, there you are.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm Cheryl Zur. I'm here in California, and I'm a retired president of my union, which is a public sector union in California.
Я Шерил, я работаю здесь, в Калифорнии, работала теперь на пенсии в калифорнийских профсоюзах.
And many years as a union activist.
Я была активистом, профсоюзным активистом много лет.
So I just want to say how much I appreciate this meeting and all the work that Vera and Pavel are doing and this presentation.
Я бы хотела сказать, что я очень благодарна за проведение этого мероприятия, и особенно Вере и Павлу за ту работу, огромную работу, которую вы проводите.
I'm also a member of the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign, which is primarily here in the United States, but a few people in Europe.
Я также являюсь, я поддерживаю кампанию украинской солидарности.
The comments that others have made, both in speaking wise and in the chat, about the problems with the official trade unions are, of course, also true here. I can imagine that no one on this meeting has heard that the AFL-CIO has lifted a finger to do much of anything for Ukrainian workers in any part of Ukraine.
Я понимаю, что проблема создания официальных профсоюзов I'm sorry, I'm having difficulties here because I'm having instructions to do something I have already done.
We just have a problem with our translation. Hang on 1 second. I think we maybe have fixed that. Our translators, you need to be listening in English and speaking in Russian. And while they're sorting that out, I just want to tell you that our translators, Anna and Sasha, who've joined us, have done so on a completely voluntary basis. And in also at very short notice, they've come to help us. And we're very grateful for that. And that's why they're not super practiced with the technology. Now, do you think we've solved the problem? I'm going to wait till somebody sends me a message saying that the problem is solved. I think the thing is that the trick is to listen in English and speak in Russian, which is, of course, the other way around from when we were working before. Okay, I think we're fixed. So, Cheryl, please, sorry for the interruption. Please say your question, and we'll move on.
Okay. Well, I guess what I do is that in the United States, we've seen in the last couple of years, we've seen the phenomenon of workers organizing independently of the official union structures, such as the Amazon workers, in the Starbucks workers. And I'm just interested in general, if you also see this phenomenon prior to the invasion in Ukraine of workers sort of rejecting the traditional lines of the unions and organizing independently. My other question may be a silly question in regards to the invasion, but when I think about Ukrainian workers and the war, I think about the working conditions and safety. And I'm wondering if that's, I know I see them laughing like, what? War? Are you crazy? But I am interested in that because workers dying on the job because they are under like super working conditions. I don't know. I'm interested in anything you might have to say about those two topics. Thank you.
L'équipement de protection
au
travail.
Vera,
donc, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas plus d'accidents au travail qu'auparavant?
Please, Vera.
Нет.
Vera, you can answer the question.
Давайте, конечно.
Да. Мы его не услышали.
Мы услышали только то, что касается феномена Амазона и как это развивается в Украине. Вот это мы слышали, этот перевод, а больше мы ничего не слышали.
So we heard the phenomenon of Amazon and how that is developing in Ukraine, but we haven't heard anything else.
Donc on a entendu quelque chose sur Amazon et est-ce que ça se passe comme Amazon en
Our
Ukraine, mais on n'a
interpreters
pas compris plus
repeat
que ça.
the question in Russian, please. It was about about the ability of workers to organize new unions and the extent to which they want to do that. And the second question was about whether working conditions have changed as a result of the war.
De répéter la question en russe pour nos panélistes.
Ну, я понял вопрос. Можно отвечать?
Можно, please, yes. Пожалуйста.
У нас, как вам сказать, у нас есть какие-то локальные профсоюзные инициативы, но такого чего-то большого и глобального, нет. Может быть, это связано с тем, что в Украине проводилась кампания декоммунизации. И почему-то все думают, что профсоюзы это что-то связанное с коммунистической партией. Может, это еще с чем-то связано. Но вы если... пожалуйста. И если вы проанализируете даже открытые источники информации, то вы не увидите каких-то профсоюзных акций больших и создания новых профсоюзных организаций, к сожалению.
Pavel, пожалуйста, я хотел бы уточнить, если я думаю, что опять есть проблемы с переводом, извините. Okay, somebody is saying in the chat that there is we cannot hear the English translation of what Pavel is saying. Interpreters, please make yourselves known to us in English and
can you hear the interpretation now?
If you can hear.
Can
Yes.
you hear the interpretation? Please, dear participants, signal.
When, we can continue.
So can we continue now?
No,
We're ready.
Минуточку, пожалуйста. Okay. Можно продолжать.
So we can go on. Thank you very much. So shall I talk? Yeah, sorry, I am a bit afraid to even begin now. I don't hear the interpreter now.
Je n'entends plus
Я думаю,
l'interprète.
что можно вам продолжать.
So I think you can continue, and there will be the English interpretation.
L'interprétation va suivre.
Great, thank you. The phenomena of big trade unions is not existent in Ukraine because we have the Confederation of the Trade Unions of Ukraine, and there is an off-stand. If a new trade union is established, the whole confederation will attack this small trade union. They will destroy it so that there is no competition. And I am talking as someone who's organized more than 100 organizations for trade unions. So I think this trend is in the way of creating a new independent trade union movement.
Détermination des structures syndicales existantes d'écraser toute organisation indépendante du travail.
Thank you very much, Pavel.
Merci, Pavel.
I just want to say, before I come to Kirill, I want to thank everybody for being patient and for helping our interpreters. And to me, this proves that as an international movement, and the workers' movement, we all believe is an international movement, communication is difficult. And we're learning how to speak with each other, and Zoom gives us new possibilities. I think this is such an important conversation. I think the work that Vera and Pavel and their colleagues are doing is so important, and I think really helps us to get to the essence of what this war is about. And I think that the problems they've drawn our attention to, the realities facing working people in those areas where they're operating is very important. So I'm really grateful, and I'm conscious that we're struggling sometimes here with the techniques, but never mind. It's the communication, I think, that we're establishing, and I see school as the beginning of a process and not the end. So I think that's really important. I'm gonna ask Kirill to come in, and no doubt Vera and Pavel will respond. Is there anybody else who's got a question? Please make yourself known now, or while Kirill is asking his question, and then I think I have a question to wind up, and we'll bring the call to an end. Okay, Kirill.
Yes, thank you, Simon. Mine is not a question, actually two comments. And the first one I want to make in English.
That's fine. Kirill, please introduce yourself. I know you, but maybe some people here don't. And please make your comment and say what you want to say. Thanks.
Okay. My name is Kirill Buketov. I was born in Moscow in 1970. I'm not going to tell you all my life, but I am currently based in Geneva, working for the International Union of Food and Allied Workers Associations. I spent lots of time in Ukraine and in other countries of Eastern Europe, trying to build a political movement of the workers under the umbrella of the International Trade Union, because I believe that is actually what matters. And Simon, you shall not apologize. Actually, we've seen a lot of progress in technology since our last presentation on Kazakhstan workers movement in London. We made a great progress. So just don't even think about this. And the comment on substance, which I wanted to make, I will probably switch to Russian, if this is okay for the interpreters. Я буду говорить по-русски теперь.
I'm going to speak Russian now because it is very important so that all the colleagues from the region hear what I want to say.
Je voudrais aussi que les participants de notre région comprennent.
Now, at the trade union level, a lot is happening. The International Confederation of Trade Unions and the Global Confederation, all of them have their own programs for support of Ukrainian trade unions. Those are implemented in different ways, but we have a lot of resources thanks to our members in European countries, in North America and in other countries, because workers want to support workers struggling in Ukraine. I myself coordinate a number of such initiatives. At a certain point, we wanted to create a joint resource where the work could be coordinated, but we realized that it was impossible because there were too many initiatives. And what makes them different from the bigger ones, as something that Red Cross is doing, for instance, they are very practice-oriented. We get a request from the trade organization from Ukraine, and we are trying to proceed with this request. They are asking for clothes, or they're asking for some appliances, washing machine, transportation, anything. And we are trying to address those needs. And we are also looking for different sources to implement that. I agree. Maybe there should be a more coordinated effort in Ukraine. The trade union organization in Ukraine could collect information in a more centralized manner. For some reason, that has not been very efficient. But from my own experience, I can say that there are a lot of grassroots initiatives from specific trade unions that are taken in. As for the overall situation, I can speak about the situation in the food sector. We, as people who deal with agriculture, are trying to have contacts with people in the facilities, but a lot of them were destroyed, they were bombed, they were closed down for different reasons because the administration thinks that they cannot continue the production. That goes for the transnational companies. A lot of trade union activists were recruited to the territorial defense, and they do not function as trade union representatives anymore. So we can see that possibilities of trade unions are quite limited and weakened in Ukraine. But also, city organizations, they make lists of what they need, and they receive the help. We sent 4 vans to Ukraine that were needed to distribute humanitarian cargo and aid. We distributed this aid across different cities in Ukraine. The last humanitarian convoy was a big bus that was sent there to transport people who are incapacitated. We put a lot of canned food in that bus, but to send food from Switzerland is not so convenient. So we asked our colleagues in Poland to help us, and the workers at the canning factories in Poland, those who are members of a trade union, so the workers bought canned food for workers with their own money so that this food will be as cheap as possible. So they put all the cargo in that bus by themselves. There are a lot of examples that are not described anywhere, but I know that Unia, the Swiss trade union, the Vera from Austria, or there are trade unions in Great Britain who are trying to organize humanitarian convoys to Ukraine, and this aid is distributed directly to people. We are ready to show that every penny or every hryvnia that was collected for this humanitarian convoy was not wasted. And there are a lot of these grassroots initiatives. If you want to participate, please contact me. I am one of numerous coordinators, and we're not going to make this effort centralized, but we're going to continue. That's what I wanted to say. Trade unions are not doing nothing. But still, the situation is critical for the trade unions in Ukraine because there is the war. Trade unions are not organizations that can deal with wars. And there is the humanitarian catastrophe. In this case, the trade unions can address the needs for humanitarian help because they have infrastructure, they have resources, and they have relations, ties. We'd like to make this more efficient, but we can find a lot of regional initiatives. Odessa, Nikolaev, Lviv, Chernihiv. There are a lot of people there who are ready to coordinate, and there are a lot of people who are ready to help organizing the delivery of aid to Donetsk. And we see that there are a lot of things that are happening. So please do not say that trade unions are not very robust. Maybe we are not very well at informing others of our activities, but we don't think that that's the most important one. I think legal support, juridical support of workers and courts is very important, but the difference between legal activities and trade union activities is that the trade union allows the workers to speak directly for themselves. That is very important for the future of Ukrainian workers can independently defend their own rights through collective action. Therefore, I think that we still should remember about this. Thank you. Could I comment? Kirill, thank you very much for your help. I didn't say that trade unions were not existent, but ask your colleagues from the trade union how many workers stopped their labor contracts, their work contracts, since March 2022. So how many of them were left out in the streets without any possibility to use any kind of legal or social help? For instance, the subway in Kharkiv, in Kiev, they fired a lot of workers. Actually, they didn't fire them. Workers were not made redundant. But a lot of workers got their work contracts suspended. What you're saying is that people will come and they will defend their rights through collective action. Here, I'm ready to engage in a discussion with you. If you show some collective action in Ukraine that actually helped In an individual case, they helped a worker. Unfortunately, for the past 5 years, the collective action has not prevented people being fired. They have not contributed to safety at factories. So when you're talking about legal support, we are not simply lawyers, we are human rights advocates. And we had to get the lawyer status because there is a law in Ukraine, and we call it a law on lawyers' monopoly. The interests of workers can be represented only by lawyers in court. That's the only reason why we wanted to get this status. That's what I said in the beginning. I myself am not a professional legal expert. I've been a worker myself. So we had to become lawyers, and I even got the lawyer's degree so that we could defend minors' rights. And I think we should not argue here. We didn't write in the announcement of this event that we want to react to humanitarian crisis. No, we wanted to speak about the violations of workers' rights. And we are speaking about the ability of the trade union to defend human rights. We're not speaking about humanitarian aid. So as regards the defense of the minors' rights, be it collectively, all of that is not sufficient. We can see that trade unions are falling behind. As for other things, as for collective contracts, some cultural activities in the factories, here we can see that trade unions are working. But that's what I said in the beginning. We are not saying that trade unions are doing something wrong. We do not want to overtake their function, but we want to strengthen defense of workers' rights and labor rights. Because we see that that's what the trade unions are not able to do. And if they want to overtake this work, we agree to that. In Ukraine, there are a lot of discussions right now, and those are grassroots discussions, that there are a lot of violations of labor rights. But amidst war, you can hardly discuss these questions openly. In court, we are trying to defend people who got their contracts suspended because those contracts were those contracts without a final date. The employer now in Ukraine can suspend a contract easily without providing any benefits to the workers. A lot of people are left out in the streets and they don't know what to do. If there is a worker who does not come to work, or there is a minor violation, people are fired. I'm speaking about some big companies now, such as mines, factories, and plants. The law on the suspension of the contract is the one that refers only to workers of big factories. And that's why we are very worried. Thank you.
Pavel, thank you, Kirill. Now I'm going to start to bring our discussion to a close. I've got one question from Peter, and Peter, I'm just going to read it out if that's okay, or is that okay? Yeah, and then I've got a question, and that's going to wrap us up. So first, let's have Peter's question. It's a question to Pavel. Pavel, you mentioned decommunization. Please, could you say a bit more about how this decommunization law affected the trade unions in Ukraine before the war?
Войны до 2014 года или вот
Do you mean before 2014 or?
New phase of the war, in other words, before February 2022. My apologies.
Ну, после революции достоинства и после того,
after the revolution of dignity and the decommunization, that means that the Soviet monuments and streets are given a different name. Some political parties were also banned in Ukraine. Of course, there were also some socioeconomic projects. There was Sergei Kaplan, the Social Democratic Party of Ukraine. He represented trade unions in the Ukrainian parliament. He did it prior to 2020. I don't know what happened, but he somehow disappeared. I think this is the first time in parliament when there are no representatives. There's only one, there is Mikhail Volynets. Mikhail Volynets is the only representative of trade unions in the parliament. Before that, there were, let's say, 3-4 representatives. The trade unions association with the workers' movement is something that made trade unions unpopular. I don't know why, but I could say that the development of trade unions has stalled. So they are now in the self-preservation stage. I'm speaking now about Ukrainian trade unions.
Thank you very much, Pavel. Now, just before I ask my question, I should refer to Kirill's point that he said that our technology has improved, and he reminded me about our meeting about Kazakhstan, and this was in, I'm going to say 2013, maybe it was 2012, and we had a film director from Moscow who'd made a great film about the workers in Zhanaozen, which was the scene of the worst massacre inflicted on the workers' movement prior to this conflict in 2022 in Ukraine. But prior to that, the worst massacre that was inflicted on the workers' movement anywhere in the former Soviet Union, which was at Zhanaozen, when the police opened fire on the strikers. And we organized a film show in London to show the film, and in fact Tony Garnett, who is a film producer who's passed away 2 years ago, I think, and who was always associated with the workers' movement here in the UK, he was with us, and all our guests were with us. We had a hall full of people, 60 or 70 people, and we couldn't get the sound on the film to work. And finally, the director himself read the text of the film. We saw the picture, and he read the text from his phone. And so, although we had that difficulty, we carried on, and we organized a lot of work internationally to support these workers in Zhanaozen who were the victims of that massacre in 2011. So yes, we go forward slowly, we don't give up if we have technical problems. Now, my question to you, Pavel and Vera, is really just if you can give us any suggestions about what we should do from outside Ukraine. While we've been speaking, I've noted down points that seem to me relevant. The first point is something that we're doing already, which is to circulate information, and I think that's very, very important. I think the information that's available about what's happening in the areas occupied by the Russian forces is very poor. So I think we can work on that. I have noted down the point that Kirill made, that trade unions, in fact, are very suitable for delivering humanitarian aid. And of course, that should continue. So that's another point. I noted down also the point which has been made about the affiliation of these fake puppet unions in the occupied areas to the operations in Russia. And this might seem to be something that's happening a long way away, but I think it's something we can shout about in the trade unions elsewhere, and I think we should. Those are the things that I have taken out of our conversation, but if you have any other things you think we should do, and of course, as I said at the beginning, this is the beginning of this conversation, but if you think there's anything else we should do, please tell us about it. Thanks.
Можно обратить внимание на
I think
освобождение из плена в России.
we could pay attention to freeing the members of trade unions who are now taken hostage by the Russian Federation. I think this is where we need help. Maxim Butkevich has been taken prisoner by the Russian Federation. So we now know that he is in prison. There are also other members of trade unions who are taken hostage by Russia. So maybe the international workers' movement could help to free these people. As for other things, Simon, I think that you've always supported us information-wise. You've always disseminated our reports, and that's great help to us. We are now dealing mainly with human rights advocacy. Now there is also what we are trying to do is to bring people back who were forcibly deported to the Russian Federation, or to help people who were mobilized forcibly. What can you do here? I'm not so sure, but we are trying to work here on the ground. Maybe you could also address the Ukrainian trade union so that they help us here. But please continue your activities. Kirill also said a lot. Maybe you could strengthen his activities as well as regards humanitarian aid. I think the humanitarian situation in Ukraine is one of the key targets. What we are doing is defending labor rights, information about the Donetsk and Luhansk occupied territories. What we are trying to do is to help people save and protect their lives, to provide them safe haven. So that's what our activity has been about. As regards, there's also legal activities that we are trying to protect people in court. For instance, the informatics teacher that I've already told you about. Unfortunately, the international community cannot really help here. So things we are doing are very specific, but you can share information I think you can use your own resource. You could also focus more on humanitarian activities. You could support Kirill. Maybe there are other people, trade union representatives. I think there was humanitarian aid delivered from Italy, from Italian trade unions. So I think that's my response.
Okay. Thank you once again, Pavel. Kirill, I see your hands up. Is it a quick point?
It is very quick. We're talking about possibility to help the people who were forcefully relocated to Russia, and that gives me an entry point to a suggestion that we actually need to discuss. How can we support anti-war movement in Russia? Yeah.
Okay. Well, we should discuss. We have done it before, but I think much of the discussion on that was at the early stage of this new war in 2022, and I think we need to discuss it again. So I take that point, and I'm sure that everybody here from the Solidarity Network takes that point. And we need to find out from our friends in Russia how they, I've seen already that people have taken actions in support of these people deported from Ukraine, including the children, very brave actions by Russians within the Russian Federation in support of those people, and I'm sure that's something we want to also strengthen. Now, I'm going to end this call here. I've put the details in the chat for our call on Sunday. That call is to speak about organizational questions that have come out of our conversations with our friends here in the Eastern Human Rights Group and with the other groups that were on the first call. What remains for me to say is once again to thank our speakers and to thank our interpreters who've done a great job, and to wish you all a good evening, and see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye to all.